Welcome to Real People, Real Voices. I'm your host, James Jackson.
I'm your co-host, Dr. Wayne Moore.
Always a pleasure to help you.
It is a great pleasure. Man, we have a special guest today.
Very special.
Yeah, a young lady by the name of Julie Young. Let's address our sponsors first, though.
Well, Lee, Castle, and Crawley.
Yes,
if you need help, they can help you.
Yeah, Furman Care Christian Academy. If you need your child disciplined, taught, and moved in the right direction, they can do it.
Yes, and the Marion County Public Health Department. All helping to keep this show on the air, and you can too.
Yeah, if you want to be a part of it, we'd love to have you.
Please go to our YouTube channel, WHMB TV 40, subscribe while you're there. Like us on Facebook.
And I love it too. Like us on Facebook, and you can go even to YouTube.
Yeah.
Get the first show we've ever done. It's still there.
And we've been on quite a while now.
God
Lord
has blessed us, man. He's blessed.
Yeah.
We're going to pray that you pray for us, that we can continue to bring information to you.
So you want to stay tuned with us November 17, 1978. Many of you all might remember the Burger Chef restaurant, the kidnapping of the four folks there, and then subsequently those individuals were found murdered.
Yes, in Johnson County, I believe it was.
Case still not solved.
It's a cold case.
Yeah. So we have Julie here's going to be talking about that in the book she wrote that you'll be able to get from your favorite place to get books, online or in a bookstore. So you want to make sure to stay with us, and we'll be back after these messages. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices, and we are joined by author Julie Young.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much.
And you've done, as we understand it, a lot of books on local history.
Yes.
Talk to us about some of those.
I've done a book on historic Irvington, the east side of Indianapolis. I'm a native east sider. The Catholic Youth Organization in central Indiana.
CYO.
Yes, CYO, absolutely. And I've done a couple of books for the Idiot's Guide series that you see in the bookstores, and then my latest on the Burger Chef murders.
And this book here, of course, talks about what happened back then. What precipitated writing this particular book, this piece of history?
I was actually researching another book at the time, and that dealt a little bit with the Jim Jones case. And I had discovered that the four young people were actually discovered on the same day that the reports had come in from Guyana that the cult had committed suicide. And I knew that he had a connection to Indiana, and then, of course, I had heard about the Burger Chef murders over the years. So I said, wow, I didn't know all that happened at the same time. And I was like, wonder what else was going on, and kind of just sort of started reading all of the articles that associated with it, not just in the Indianapolis paper, but also Johnson County, and kind of thought, this is such a fascinating case, and there was a lot going on at that time. The murders happened just 2 months after the Speedway bombings, which had happened only a month after another woman was gunned down in her garage. It was a really unique time, and I thought, it needed a showcase and to put in some context of what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that case remains unsolved. Yes. In your book, you talk about the possibility of, with some of the latest technology, possibly being able to solve that case?
There's always a chance. Obviously they didn't have the DNA and forensic technology that they do today. And they've certainly done their diligence in terms of making sure they have samples of things should anything come up. I don't know if anything will happen or not, but I never want these kids forgotten, Weird things continue to happen to this day, and I just don't ever want those kids or that case ever forgotten.
You remember their names?
Yes, there was Mark Flemons, Daniel Davis, Ruth Ellen Shelton, and Jane Freed.
Found in the field in Johnson County.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that. I was a kid when that happened.
Yeah, I was only 6 years old when it happened.
Crawfordsville Road.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I remember it.
So what do you hope, outside of not, or along with not forgetting these kids' names, what do you hope will happen as people begin to read this book?
Well, I hope that people get the full picture of what happened. I think that's very important, not just a brief recap, every 5 years, which tends to happen or so. More importantly, it's very important that we can never get complacent in this day and age, even though we do have a lot more available, weird things still happen. You know, there are still cases that go unsolved. The girls in Delphi, Lauren Spear, you know, there's the case of Denise Flum out in Connorsville, you know, from the mid-'80s, you know, where strange things still happen that shouldn't happen, that you think, surely there's enough pieces of the puzzle that we can figure out what happened, and cases still fall through the cracks.
Even the 4 young ladies in Floral.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, you know, I want not only the case remembered, but above that, not to get complacent in this day and age, even though we do have much more available to us.
So as we go into a book like this, certainly there's your introduction, and then how does it kind of play out with each chapter? Kind of give us a synopsis.
It really is just a historical look at the case, beginning with an overview of the kids themselves, you know, who they were, what, you know, what we know about their career with the franchise. You know, the one young lady was a assistant manager, and she was actually in line to get another promotion and become a manager at the beginning of the year. You know, it was the week before Thanksgiving, so people were gearing up for, you know, state football games and, you know, gatherings with family and friends. You know, it should have been a time of anticipation, togetherness, you know, and fellowship, you know, and for these 4 families, I can only imagine. And touching a little on the history of the franchise and how important it was to the city of Indianapolis. Obviously, Burger Chef was founded here. And then going into the actual case itself, what, you know, the other incidents that led up to it, why there was such an urgency beyond simply trying to find 4 young people, you know, but you have these other 2 cases that at the time weren't solved either, you know, so there was even more of an urgency for the police department to catch them, find the kids, find them safe, you know, and catch whoever did this. And then over the course of the years, what the strange twists and turns, the eventual confession in the mid-'80s by a gentleman who said he had something to do with it, but then recanted, you know, and they were never able to prove it. And just the idea that so many of these parents passed without ever having that answer.
Right.
And, you know, I can't imagine that myself. You know, as a parent myself, I can't imagine not knowing, you know, or, you know, knowing what happened, but not knowing why. So that was kind of the idea behind, you know, just giving a full perspective of 40 years of a case that people have worked tirelessly on, you know, to no avail.
Did several interviews, apparently.
You know what? I didn't. I tried to get a hold of the state police department, but I really relied a lot on the published reports because I thought that was going to give me the best play-by-play, real-time, if you will, you know, reactions and encounters, plus also the retrospectives where people had time to reflect on things and talk a little bit about it, you know, and what they might not have been able to talk about.
What was Burger Chef's position? I know they were, you know.
There was a tragedy, obviously.
It was a tragedy for Burger Chef, but how did they handle that?
They did make some changes, and I don't know how many of those changes were commonplace of all fast food franchises at the time, but I know that they definitely made a policy of nobody was allowed to take the garbage out after dark. You know, and even now, if you go to a fast food place, and if you can see to the back door, you will often see a sign that says, "Don't open this door. Your life may depend on it." You know, and that always makes me think of those kids, you know, that, you know, it seems like just good advice, you know, but on the other hand, for 4 kids, it didn't work out.
Well, thanks for writing the book.
Thank you for having me.
Wish you much success with it.
Thank you so much.
Where can people get it?
They can get it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, your local retailer. I will be at various locations throughout the city, throughout the rest of the summer and the fall.
Thanks for writing so much history
Thank you so much.
for Indianapolis.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices, and we're joined by attorney Nathaniel Lee, I should say super attorney.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all, you're welcome, and thank you for being a sponsor.
Yeah.
We appreciate you.
Thank you for being a sponsor and sticking with us and making sure the community gets great information.
Well, I really enjoyed the show, and we got two great ambassadors for the profession and our community. So thank you, Jennifer, for all the good things that you do in our community. I really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you so much. Another thing, we need to congratulate you. You have just been voted in as the vice president of not the local, not the state, but the National Bar Association. Tell us about that.
Well, thank you, Pastor. Essentially, the National Bar Association is one of the largest bar associations in the world. We represent the interests of about 65,000 African-American attorneys and judges. The National Bar Association was formed in 1925. All of the major civil rights legislation, litigation has been led by the National Bar. A lot of people don't realize that. Starting back in the 20s and the 30s, and the famous case like Sweat versus Painter, which led to the mission of the first black in the University of Texas segregated law school. Brown versus Board of Education had members of the National Bar. And going forward, all your major civil rights initiative that we've seen in our country, they've been at the forefront. We got a great leader now, Pastor. We have Dean Frida Robinson, our president, and that's how I became the vice president, because we had such an outstanding leader that wanted me to come on board to help out in this critical time in American history.
Lee, you mentioned something about civil rights. When you talk to most people that are in that particular profession, the law profession, they seem to think that civil rights has shifted. It is not as we know civil rights once was to be, what it was. It's totally different now. Could you explain that to our listeners?
Well, what has happened is that we've seen a radical departure in norms in our country. And that's why I thought it was necessary, particularly at this moment in time in American history, that we have a national response to things that have occurred. Like, for example, in the panacea that I'm in, the judicial arena in the legal community, we've seen a radical shift in terms of how federal judges are selected in our country. In prior administration, we've always had input from the American Bar Association. The American Bar Association is the largest bar association in the world, but the leadership in the American Bar Association parallels the National Bar. We have a lot of joint things we do. In fact, I was speaking to the president of the National Bar just a couple weeks ago. So now judges become lifetime appointment without having any credentials that meet the criteria of either bar association. Now, why is that important? History has a strange tendency to repeat itself. You know, back in the 1930s, I was looking at the National Bar's history. The big issue in the 1930s, particularly for African Americans, was the threat of communism. And they had to swear that they're not a communist. Well, guess what? In 2016, what do we see? Russian communism. You know, so we see history just reoccurring, and we don't know how significant a problem it is. We see a radical decline in the moral culture of the country, and also, but we have a great president that has some significant initiatives to try to address some of the issues that we're facing today.
And that would be the president of the National Bar Association.
Yeah, President Frida Robinson, who's she's just such a phenomenal leader. And Pastor, what she's doing this year, there's a number of initiatives, but the most important one that we're going to talk about right away is the pay equity issue. In America, we've seen a dramatic shift in the education level of African American women. Now, based upon the higher education statistic, black females now, population percentage-wise, now have more college degrees than any other demographics in our country. However, August the 22nd of 2019, the National Bar is going to start a conversation about pay equity. Black females in our country with the same educational level as white male or non-Hispanic male will take until August the 22nd of this year to earn the same amount of money as non-Hispanic or non-people of color or white males earned on December 31st of last year. Okay. Now, we think that this is an important point of beginning. In our society, many of the elements of our society tracks back to economics. So in the black household, black women are the leaders financially in 84.4% of the cases. So they're either the primary or the sole earner in 84.4% of the household. So now, what we have to do is start a nationwide dialogue on this important societal issue. We have to look at the pay inequity issue and start with the black female. Why? Because so many of them head up households.
And speaking of the family, and you're right on point with talking about how the families have changed, particularly the black family. You've got an annual event coming up, Adopt a Family program. Talk to us about that.
Well, each year, well, first I need to thank the leadership and the minister, our great pastor, Pastor Moore at Olivet, who has been a blessing to the Lee Foundation. What has happened back in 1984, my wife, who passed in 2004, she started giving away gifts to kids that was impoverished in her school district very discreetly. And then, so by last year, I think it was 664, and church has been a blessing. We have probably about 80 volunteers. I mean, it's just a whole host of folks. The members of the church, the ministers, the brothers come out, they put together bicycles, they sacrifice many hours, and they do a wonderful job, Pastor, and we're able to help so many folks. We even had the mayor and people like that, they participate, but more important, the members of the church has been so phenomenal. And we get these folks from the different churches. They refer people, and people from the community, regardless of race or otherwise, but if they need help, and we provide some great things. Last year, Pastor, we had a really phenomenal blessing. We had designer clothing. We didn't give away cheap stuff, Pastor. It was some very expensive clothing.
It was some major pieces.
Yeah, we were able to get, $400 or $500 suits and dresses. That we got lucky. One of my son's best college friends, his wife was able to get a big surplus of goods from high-end stores, and they were able to make a large donation, and we were able to give those clothes away, and it was just such a blessing. And most people were just shocked when they saw these designer clothing. They were, the stuff they see on TV that you only dream about getting, but you don't. It take about a month's pay to get. Well, we were giving that stuff away last year.
And it's good to know that the Lee Foundation is open for contributions. So just contact the law office of Lee, Castle, and Crawley, and they'll give you the number that you can call and make a firm, solid contribution for what they're going to do at Christmas time for these kids and these families. And it's amazing to see how this all comes together. And if we could just mention this and raise $5,000 or $6,000 just on this show, getting the information, it would be phenomenal for that foundation.
Absolutely.
Because y'all know that's what I like to do, is raise resources.
And you're gifted for it.
Yeah.
So we want you to do that. Make sure you call the office. Give them that number to call, Lee. Look in that camera and give them that number.
Yeah, our phone number is 317-631-5151. And but we also we look for volunteers, and also feel free to come join us at church, because we also, as part of the process now, we sponsor a breakfast.
Yeah.
Man, I tell you, we have the best breakfast. I look forward to that each year.
I see the smile on your face.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's just phenomenal. It's it's fellowship, but it's just a lot of love there and a lot of caring, and I just enjoy that time of year, and I'm very thankful that we're able to do that.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It blesses a lot. It's annual Adopt a Child, Adopt a Family. It's great, and you all who know me in the community know that I'm for real, and I put my money and my resources where my mouth is. If I could just at least get the community to contribute at least $5,000 to this particular. And this is not what this is about, but it just happens that he mentioned it. Mm-hmm. And when you mention something like that, I'm going to get on it. And just call the office, and he'll make sure and let them know that you want to contribute to Adopt a Family for Christmas this year. Let's get it done, and let's volunteer.
And before we let you go, Attorney Lee, one of the things that you're passionate about, I can remember a few years ago being in a meeting, you were talking about the importance of voting and being registered to vote. In the time we have left, kind of talk about that for some of our viewers who might not think it's that important.
Well, Pastor, I do a radio show, and what was shocking to me is that we had like 9% of the folks in Marion County turn out to vote, in this year's primary election. And we are in turbulent times now. We have a political climate that is the most toxic that we've seen since the 1860s, in the sense that we're out of political norms now. We have foreign countries that are invading our electoral process, and we seem like we're impotent to do anything about it. We have a growth in mass shooting in our country. America now is the most unsafe country in the whole world. We've had over 300 mass shootings in America this year already. We talked about it in church, but my heart goes out. It's almost like every weekend you hear about some mass shooting somewhere in this country.
Yeah.
And you look it up, there's a website now, and I looked it up on the website. It was like 339 by August the 5th, mass shooting in America. Yeah. And there was a lot that I'd forgotten about. So voting become a critical issue in terms of how we prioritize things in America. I'm a Second Amendment person, but I believe in a right to bear arms, but we have more guns in America than any other country. And so I think that we have to vote in politicians that are in favor of some responsible gun control legislation. Now, I was in the military, so I was a marksman, so I believe that I have a right to have a rifle, but I don't think that we should have automatic weapons of mass destruction out murdering people. And right now, it put our police at a big disadvantage. Law enforcement people are unsafe with our guns laws now. We can't, they can't protect us if they can't protect themselves, and we put these automatic weapons in the hands of crazy folks or people that do harm. It's not just the white supremacists that are dangerous. It's just a whole plethora of folks that are doing this.
Right.
When I looked at the statistics, I said, my goodness, this is out of control. So we have to make people aware of the fact that you got to get out and vote. There's an election coming up on November 5th this year in Indianapolis and in this state, and make sure you get out and vote.
Well, thank you. You've been a great guest, as always.
Well, thank you, Pastor.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you.
And thank you for joining us here on Real People, Real Voices. We'll see you the same time, same channel next week.